In January 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. They were young, disciplined, and trained. Most were university students. All of them knew how to survive extreme cold. They never came back. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov. The group planned a winter expedition to reach Otorten Mountain, a route so dangerous that success would earn them the highest hiking certification in the USSR. They weren't reckless. They prepared for months. They carried proper gear, food, and journals. On February 1st, something went terribly wrong. That night, the group pitched their tent on the slope of Koletsyakhl. Locals called it Dead Mountain. The weather was brutal. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Wind howled across the open slope. Then was silence. When rescuers finally found the campsite weeks later, it made no sense. The tent was still standing, but it had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped. Slashed, footprints led away from the tent. Barefoot prints, some wearing socks, some wearing only one shoe. They walked calmly, not running, straight into the frozen darkness. The first 2 bodies were found near a tree almost a mile away. They were barefoot. Their hands were burned, as if they had tried to climb the tree or start a fire. Their skin was blackened from frostbite. 3 more bodies lay between the tree and the tent, as if they tried to return, and failed. The remaining 4 were discovered months later in a ravine. This is where the story turns disturbing. Their injuries were catastrophic. Crushed skulls, shattered ribs, internal damage comparable to a car crash, but no external wounds, no bruises, no broken skin. One woman was missing her tongue. Her eyes were gone. Parts of her face were missing. And then, investigators noticed something else. Some of the clothing was radioactive. The Soviet authorities closed the case quickly. The official cause of death? An unknown compelling force. The files were sealed. Witnesses were silenced. And for decades, no one spoke. But the mountain remembers. And what happened on that slope was never natural. The Soviet investigation began quietly, and then unraveled just as fast. Search teams noticed something chilling right away. The hikers had enough time to grab coats. They had enough time to put on boots, but they didn't. This wasn't panic. It was urgency without explanation. Inside the tent, everything was normal. Food untouched. Equipment neatly arranged. Boots lined up by the entrance. Nothing suggested a fight. Nothing suggested an avalanche. And yet, they fled. Experts ruled out an avalanche almost immediately. The slope angle was wrong. No debris covered the tent. The tent poles were still standing. If an avalanche had hit, the campsite would have been destroyed. It wasn't. Then came the autopsies. 5 hikers died from hypothermia, but the other 4, that's where logic collapsed. One man's ribs were crushed inward so violently his heart was displaced. Another had a skull fracture larger than most battlefield injuries. The medical examiner said something chilling. These injuries could only be caused by an immense force, comparable to a high-speed vehicle impact. But there were no vehicles. No trees were broken. No signs of a fall. And there was something else. Their eyes were wide open, frozen in expressions of shock. One woman's tongue was missing. Not bitten, not torn, gone. Authorities claimed animals did it. But predators don't selectively remove tongues and leave the rest untouched. Then the radiation report surfaced. Several pieces of clothing showed radiation levels far above normal, not environmental, not explainable by geology. One hiker had previously worked near nuclear facilities, but that didn't explain why only parts of clothing were contaminated, or why the government classified the data. The case was closed in May 1959. No suspects, no explanation. No public discussion allowed. Families were warned not to ask questions. Searchers were told to forget what they saw. And for decades, the file stayed buried. But the truth didn't stay silent, because witnesses later came forward. Locals reported glowing orange spheres in the sky that night. Pilots reported strange lights moving unnaturally over the Urals. Military logs quietly confirmed missile tests in the region, right where the hikers disappeared. The mountain wasn't empty that night. Something moved above it, and whatever forced those hikers out of their tent didn't leave footprints. Years passed, and the Dyatlov Pass became a forbidden subject. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, something unexpected happened. The files reopened. Investigators reviewing the original photographs noticed details that had been ignored or deliberately overlooked. In one photo, taken shortly before the hikers vanished, a strange light appears in the sky. Not a star, not the moon. A glowing orb blurred as if it was moving. Another recovered camera told an even darker story. The final frames show chaos, blurry snow, uneven horizons, a sudden flash of light, then nothing. No final message. No goodbye, just silence. In the early 1990s, a former lead investigator broke his silence. He admitted something shocking. The official conclusion was not his decision. He was ordered to close the case. The cause of death he was instructed to write? A compelling natural force. That phrase meant nothing. And it was meant to mean nothing. It allowed the government to walk away without explanation. But locals never believed it. The Mansi people, native to the region, had warned the hikers not to camp on that mountain. They called it Kholat Shachel, the mountain of the dead. Not because people died there often, but because those who did never died normally. Hunters described nights when the snow glowed, when the wind screamed like metal tearing, when the ground vibrated underfoot. Then came the military testimonies. Former Soviet soldiers admitted to weapons tests in the area, experimental devices designed to create shockwaves and extreme pressure. Not explosions, something else. A force that could crush ribs without leaving external wounds. Sound, infrasound, low-frequency waves capable of inducing panic, disorientation, and terror. Capable of making trained adults flee in confusion, even into freezing darkness. But infrasound didn't explain everything. It didn't explain the radiation. It didn't explain the missing tongue. It didn't explain the lights. And it didn't explain why rescue teams were ordered to stop searching certain zones. Years later, satellite images revealed restricted areas overlapping the pass. Zones never officially acknowledged. The mountain was being watched. Even today, documents remain sealed. Key files are still missing. And the Russian government's modern explanation? A rare wind phenomenon. No names, no physics, no proof. Just another vague answer. Because admitting the truth would raise a bigger question. If those hikers didn't die from nature, then what exactly was tested on that mountain? And why has every government involved refused to talk about it? Decades later, a new investigation tried to put the mystery to rest. In 2019, Russian authorities officially reopened the Dyatlov Pass case. This time they promised transparency. They reviewed old evidence, re-examined the terrain, ran modern simulations, and then they closed it again. Their final conclusion? An avalanche. But this explanation immediately collapsed under scrutiny. There were no avalanche warning signs on the slope. The tent site showed no heavy snow displacement. Nearby trees were still standing undamaged. And most importantly, experienced hikers don't flee an avalanche uphill. They cut the tent from the inside. They ran in multiple directions. Some stopped. Some returned. That's not avalanche behavior. Then came a more unsettling theory. A slab avalanche triggered by unusual snow conditions. But even that failed to explain why some bodies were found far from the tent, or why others were partially buried weeks later, or why internal injuries matched high-impact trauma without external damage. Meanwhile, independent researchers uncovered something chilling. Archived military documents referenced aerial tests conducted near the region. Tests involving parachute-deployed devices, weapons designed to detonate mid-air, not fireballs, pressure waves, enough to cause massive internal injuries, enough to terrify anyone below, enough to light up the sky. Witnesses from nearby villages reported glowing spheres drifting silently overhead that same night. Some said the lights pulsed. Others said they hummed, and then vanished. No official military record exists for those tests, but classified doesn't mean imaginary. It means hidden. Another detail refused to disappear: the hikers' clothes. Radiation levels were higher than normal. Not lethal, but unnatural. One of the victims had worked in nuclear facilities before the trip. Others had not. Yet multiple bodies showed contamination. How did it spread? No answer was given. No answer ever is. Because every theory, avalanche, infrasound, secret weapons, explains part of the story, but none explain all of it. And that's the real problem. When fragments fit, but the whole picture refuses to form, it means something doesn't belong in the story, or something was removed. And until the sealed files are opened, until the missing reports are released, the Dyatlov Pass will remain what it has always been. Not an accident, not a tragedy, but a warning. Today, Dyatlov Pass is no longer restricted. Tourists hike the route. Adventurers camp near the slope. Drones fly where helicopters once circled in silence. But nothing has changed. Compasses still malfunction near the mountain. Sudden storms appear without warning. Electronic equipment fails for no clear reason. Some hikers report overwhelming dread, a feeling of being watched. A pressure in the chest they can't explain. They leave early. Search and rescue teams still receive distress calls from the area. Most end with confusion. Then silence. The mountain doesn't kill often, but when it does, it kills completely. In 2020, an independent team recreated the hikers' route using modern gear, thermal drones, pressure sensors, radiation detectors. Their findings were never fully published. The lead researcher later stated only one sentence: "What happened there is not something nature does alone." No follow-up interview was allowed. No data released. And just like before, the conversation stopped. The Dyatlov Pass incident sits in a rare category. Too documented to dismiss, too inconsistent to explain, too dangerous to revisit honestly. 9 people went into those mountains. None of them came back. And despite decades of investigations, dozens of theories, and multiple official closures, no one can say with certainty why trained hikers fled barefoot into freezing darkness, why some were crushed from the inside, why the sky glowed, or why the truth keeps getting buried. Because if the answer were simple, it would have been told already. And if it were harmless, it wouldn't still be hidden. The mountain may be silent, but its secrets are still waiting. If you think you know what really happened, comment below, and make sure to subscribe, because the full truth is still out there, waiting for those brave enough to see it.